Whether you're a brand new player or a seasoned Quake veteran, Ranger is without a doubt the best champion to learn Quake Champions with and remains one of the best champions in the game, even at professional levels of play. Let's take a look at how best to use him and how to be as effective as possible with him. Ranger has a maximum of 125 health and 100 armor, putting him at a maximum of 225 total health when fully stacked. More often than not though, you're not going to be maxed out on health like that, so expect to generally be just a little bit squishier than that. As per normal, your health and armor values will go over their normal max by 50 points each if you take a major power-up like Mega Health or Heavy Armor, or if you use armor shards which are dropped by dead players. As Ranger, your body size is considered medium, and you are considered a medium-sized champion for the purposes of determining the rate at which your health and armor decay when these values surpass their normal value, thanks to pickups like Heavy Armor or Mega Health. Long story short here, heavy champions have a very slow health decay when overhealed, and light champions of course have a very fast health decay. Ranger sits right in the middle. While playing as this champion, you have a few different speed caps to be aware of. From a dead stop, if you start walking forward, you will reach a speed of 320 UPS. If you continuously hold forward, your speed will ramp up to 400 over time. When strafe jumping, your speed can reach a hard cap of 640 UPS. Given enough time and effort, you can reach fantastic speeds with this champion, and this is only buffed by his passive ability. Ranger takes 25% less self-damage than any other champion thanks to this ability, meaning that he's ideal for rocket jumping, tri-bolt jumping, and nail climbing. Your active ability is the Dire Orb, which flies in a perfectly straight line when thrown. If it impacts any piece of the map, like a wall or a floor, it will stick there for a split second before detonating for a maximum of 100 damage, decreasing with distance from the epicenter. If you reactivate your ability button before the Dire Orb explodes, you're going to teleport to it, detonating it mid-air for identical explosion damage as if it was just to hit a target and then explode on its own. With perfect timing, you can teleport inside of your opponent, and when done properly, you will kill them instantly. This is called a telefrag, with the announcer calling out Shubslayer, as a reference to the lore of how Ranger acquired that Dire Orb in the first place. Now, this is all well and good, but how do we actually play as Ranger, right? Why are we even here? Luckily, with his stats being so middle of the road, and with his ability being so versatile, we can play him literally any way that we want and find success. You could be hyper aggressive, utilizing strafe jumping and rocket jumping to cover maps at breakneck speeds in order to bully your opponents into submission, all while having a nice thick health stack to work with and the threat of an instant kill from Dire Orb. You can be super passive, forcing railgun battles and using Dire Orb to constantly reposition and threaten your opponent from confusing angles, all while having a small enough body that you aren't taking free hits constantly, as larger champs like Clutch would otherwise suffer from. Generally speaking though, Ranger is going to shine in close range engagements a bit more than any other fight, but remember, he's still phenomenal everywhere else. This is not to downplay his long range or mid range performance, it's just that his close range performance is absolutely amazing. The big reason for this is the Dire Orb ability, for the same reason that other champions with similar offensive abilities are so good at close range, and here's why. In Quake, when you fire your weapon, you're unable to make a weapon switch until your gun cycles or is ready to fire again. This is most noticeable with the railgun. Try taking a shot and then immediately swapping weapons. Your character is going to stand around, waiting until the railgun reloads itself, and then they'll switch weapons. Dire Orb and other offensive abilities are so good in this situation because you can interrupt that cycling animation, that cycling time, with your abilities. So if you get caught out of position with a railgun, you can take a quick pot shot with it, then immediately toss your orb out, teleport to it for damage or possibly a telefrag, and as soon as that animation is done, you're ready to either fire a second rail or swap to another weapon. The same situation applies to the rocket launcher, where you can fire a rocket, then instantly toss a dire orb in order to go for huge burst damage on your target, or, if you're really good, pop them up with the rocket and then telefrag them instantly in the air where they cannot dodge the orb. Compound this with only a 20-second cooldown on dire orb in the current version of the game, and you've got one of, if not the best active abilities of any champion, all packed nice and tight into a character who's already good at everything else. The most important thing to do with Ranger above all else is to first learn how to strafe jump, circle jump, and rocket jump. Now that sounds weird because we were just talking about why orb is so good and why dire orb is what defines Ranger as a character. Well, there's a reason for this. While the dire orb is indeed an incredible movement tool, if you learn to get where you need to go without the dire orb by using rocket jumps and circle jumps and strafe jumps and whatever other movement mechanics that exist in the game, you're suddenly going to be a lot deadlier because your orb is always ready to use during fights and you're only relying on it during fights. This makes you incredibly difficult to engage upon because you're always threatening that telefrag or a free escape if you get caught out of position. I can't tell you how many times I'd want to fight thanks to getting that dire orb off on somebody, especially fights that I otherwise had no business winning whatsoever. Getting surprised by an enemy with no health, and then spinning around doing that sick 180 to get the clutch telefrag is one of the most broken things that you can do in Quake Champions. It honestly feels like cheating, and I strongly recommend practicing this particular scenario to find a maximum success with the character. It's really hard to fight a Ranger, even when they're weak, just because of how strong that orb is. That threat of the telefrag is ever present. Ranger effectively lets you break the game. It lets you break Quake in a way that you've never been able to do in another Quake title ever before. You're able to trounce the reload mechanics of your guns in the game. You're able to trounce that cycling time. You're able to perform actions when you otherwise normally could not perform actions. Using the railgun more often than you would with other champions becomes less of a risk than it otherwise would. Same thing applies to characters like Sorlag or even Keel, who can always use their abilities in between those shots offensively and have that constant offensive pressure upon their targets. The Ranger is not unique in this way, but Ranger is very strong because of this offensive ability. It's so critical that you learn this above mostly all else apart from your base movement mechanics. This is so critical and so core to the character. Next, we need to consider duel and what matchups are most important to us, what situations are most favorable to us in picking this champion. Large opponents like Sorlag, Clutch, Keel, and Scalebearer are generally going to have a really bad time against the Dire Orb since they're so much easier to telefrag than a small champion like Nyx or Anarchy. Hitting a Nyx flying at you with 720 UPS while wall jumping and dropping in or out of phase shift is incredibly difficult, but hitting a Clutch going mid-600s trying to close the gap on you with their shield? I'll take that fight any day of the week over the Nyx. Hitting a Scalebearer that's charging at you or punishing a Doomslayer that's too reliant on the double jump should be enough to make you salivate. Against smaller champions like Nyx or Anarchy, you're generally not going to be using this ability with the goal of getting those telefrags, using it for mobility to stay away from bad railgun battles, or just for straight up damage when they inevitably get in your face with a rocket launcher is usually good enough. Outside of specific champion matchups, Ranger is one of the best champions that you can play when out of control as well. When dueling, you're generally going to be considered either in control or out of control, and some champions are really good at one or the other. Consider this, you're dueling and Ranger is not your first champion pick. You get picked off by an enemy Sorlag right when the major power-ups are about to respawn, and she's in a position to grab one immediately. Taking Ranger in as your second champion in this situation is pretty strong because you have so much versatility available to you. You can play slow and elusive, slowly stacking yourself up with weapons and using the orb to escape. Or, if the Sorlag catches you right off spawn and tries to rush you down, you've always got the threat of the telefrag in your back pocket to get you right back into the game. It doesn't matter how beaten down you are as Ranger or how stacked up your opponent is. Dire Orb threatens an instant kill at all times, making it very comfortably a top tier ability when playing out of control. In summary, Ranger is straight up the perfect champion to use as a starting player. He's got great mobility, a great health stack, one of the best active abilities in the game, and one of the best passive abilities in the game as well. He's a jack of all trades, while also being a master of close range fights and vertical map traversal. Give him enough practice, and you'll be dominating the arena in no time. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope that you've learned something new from this guide. If you want to see more content like this, please consider supporting me over on Patreon so I can come closer and closer to making Twitch and YouTube and content creation a more sustainable job. Not just a hobby, but a true, proper job. If you guys want to see more like this, make sure you also subscribe. Leave me a comment if you have any questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them and try to help you become the best Ranger you can be. Apart from that, guys, that's it for today's guide. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.